Hello, Bible lovers. This time around, I thought we'd look at some old familiar passages and see if we could find a few new things to learn about them. And the first one is from Matthew, the 7th chapter, verse 12. In everything, then, do to others as you would have them do to you. For this is the essence of the law and the prophets. And the second one is from the 22nd chapter of Matthew, where someone conveniently asked Jesus, "Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses?" Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments." What exactly is Jesus talking about? Well, we have a nice application of what he means in John, the 8th chapter. That's where the adulteress is brought to Jesus for judging in the temple. And Jesus says, "Let the one without sin cast the first stone." Everybody walks away, and he does not condemn her. Even though the law condemns her, he lets her off the hook. She doesn't ask for forgiveness. She doesn't repent. She doesn't promise to sin no more. He just sends her on her way. Why? Because he's doing to her what he would want done to him. He would not want to be stoned to death. He will not stone anyone to death. He will not condemn anyone according to the law. Rather, he substitutes do to others as you would have them do to you instead of the law, instead of enforcing the negative parts of the law. Although oddly, the apostles, or the disciples rather, seem to have kept all the dietary stuff, all the tithing stuff, and they went happily to the temple and they were comfortable at the temple doing all the ritual stuff. All that stayed, but all the life and death stuff contained in the law, Jesus shoved that aside and substituted the do to others as you would have them do to you principle. So the question is, Bible lovers, if this new command to do to others as you would have them do to you contains the entire law and satisfies all the demands of the prophets, then why isn't it the central part of every Christian sermon? Why don't you hear it 10 times over as the standard of behavior? In fact, why do they keep dragging up line by line all kinds of stuff from the law and the prophets? Why is there all this endless mad study of that when Jesus bypassed it completely? Another thing you'll notice about almost all of the quotes where Jesus talks about the Old Testament, they're all super brief, and he uses them mostly just to shut down religious people. It's never to promote the law. It's never to promote more religion. It's to shut people down. He uses a minimum. You could probably write out all of Jesus' studies, his Bible studies from the Old Testament, on maybe the front and back of a piece of notebook paper, and probably have room left over. Because I think he quotes less than 50 times the Old Testament, and it's all under 20 words is like tops. He just doesn't quote it, doesn't wallow in it. Whereas that's the whole bag of Christianity. They'll teach you everything except for do to others as you would have them do to you. And that is because that is what Christians pay them to do. Because if you follow that advice in everything, well, you're not going to support any of the wars and so forth that, of course, the church is exempt from. They don't have to serve. But if you decide you're not going to do to others as you would have them do to you, you're not going to bayonet anybody or carpet bomb anybody or shoot any kid protesting at the border, then you're going to be at odds with Caesar. And you're paying the clergy to protect you from Jesus, essentially. Because this is essentially Jesus' decency and his standard of behavior. But if they can keep snowing you with all the crap about the law and the prophets and how holy they are and how Jesus has already taken care of everything, so you don't have to actually do anything, well, they've done their job. And that's why you hire the hired shepherds that Jesus told you not to hire. Another thing people pay the clergy for is to guide the youth. That is, to be a babysitter. And babies turn into teenagers. As a standard of morality, you don't want to tell a bunch of teenagers over and over again to do to others as you would have them do to you. That's just the sort of thing most parents want to avoid. And most parents are the ones dragging their children to church, and so they certainly don't want them getting that message. They want them to hear all about the law and the prophets and all the bad things that happen to disobedient people. Again, that's what you're paying them for. But again, that is not what Jesus taught. But there's a difference between what Jesus teaches and what the Christians teach. Anyway, always remember, the church ignores this whenever possible. They burned people to death for like 1,000 years because they don't believe in doing to others as you would have done to you. It just isn't part of their teaching. So be like Jesus. Only quote the Old Testament to shut people up who are religious, and be as brief as possible. Now and for the rest of your life, whenever you hear a Christian minister speak, listen to how many times they never quote Matthew 7:12. Thanks for watching.